everybody, I'm Katallina, and today we're here to talk about episode 4 of Acro Trip. Remember how concerned I was last week about how much there was actually to discuss? Well, this week we have nothing to fear because this week was absolutely amazing and there was some super interesting things that happened and they actually lead into some interesting ideas and discussions about several different things. Let's start with the way that Chroma was actually behaving this week and what was happening to him, because Chroma really went through a crisis this week. I mean, he almost shut his evil organization down. Technically, he did shut it down temporarily, and there are some legitimately good reasons for that. I mean, dude could not catch a break, and I felt absolutely bad for him, which is a really interesting angle and take to see them do with the, quote, villain of a piece in a story. But I really like the way that they did this, because in this story, while Chroma and by extension Chizuko is actually the villain, we actually have the reality that they are not actually that bad as far as being people, which is a really fun way to look at this situation because it's a way that we often don't get really to look at villains in storytelling. Usually the villain is obviously seen in a negative light and through negative connotations because what they are ultimately is the antagonist to the hero's story, which means that whether or not they are in and of themselves inherently evil, they are a block to the objectives of the person we are supposed to empathize with. In this story, we are actually supposed to empathize with Chroma and with Chizuko. So it actually allows us to turn things on their head. And in this particular situation that Chroma faces, we see that Berry Blossom, intentionally or not, ultimately destroys what Chroma considers to be his home. Because she sees Chroma cooking a fish over a fire, and she attacks the bridge he's under, as though the fire hazard that he presents by using a campfire in an unlegalized area is more serious than what her superpowers are able to do to a bridge. It kind of makes me think of some of the situations that are faced by Mr. Incredible in The Incredibles, which was really clever. And I thought it was really interesting to see that although she didn't do it thinking that, haha, I am the ultimate evil, she thinks she's doing the ultimate good. It can actually be really easy for someone to think that they are doing something with good intent and, directly or not, in the perspective of another person, be doing something that is inherently evil. That's actually quite fascinating, and I thought the show was super smart to handle it. What I also really like about this overall situation that happens to Chroma is the reality that it's actually Chizuko's grandfather who takes Chroma in. And I mean, we've seen the grandfather help Chroma several times, and it's not that the grandfather is a villain. On the contrary, one thing I want to talk about here in this video is the reality that Chizuko's grandfather is actually probably the most wholesome embodiment of goodness and kindness and decency in the entire show, because Chizuko's grandfather will help anyone. He helps with caring for Berry Blossom when she's hurt in a previous episode. He takes Chroma in multiple times. He takes Chizuko in and lets her live in his home because her mother keeps moving around constantly and Chizuko needs something more stable, or more directly, of course, she wants to be in the presence of Berry Blossom. So I really do want to give Grandpa here some total props. I think he's really awesome. I also briefly want to touch on that ending sequence with him and the little bear creatures. I cannot remember what they're technically called. And the one he takes to the go thing, and it's all like, it's all shy to come in and everything. But it's not just that they play go, it's that they do sports. And afterward, where the little bear is doing the exercises with Chroma and his little bear buddies, and he's just so stiff and so sore, and Chroma is just like, what happened to you? And then finds out and is just like, no. It was amazing. Grandpa is definitely star character in this aspect of the story, and I really like that he's here, and I really like that he isn't as tied into the evil organization versus Berry Blossom situation. He just cares about being a decent person overall. And I think that that is a great thing to actually have represented to the audience, because I don't think you necessarily have to get tied into any form, one way or another, of ideology to be a good person. I think that if you just focus on general kindness, you can get a long way toward being just a nice, decent person who's going to live a nice, decent life. Now, as we move along, let's talk a bit about Chizuko and what's actually going on with her in this week's episode, which she is initially very happy to hear that Chroma is closing down the evil organization, because initially she's thinking, yay, Berry won! And it takes a few minutes for it to happen, but eventually she catches up to the reality that Berry might have hypothetically won, but Chizuko, has lost. Because now that Berry Blossom doesn't need to actually fight evil, Berry Blossom's role as a hero and as a magical girl shifts drastically. She goes from fighting against Chroma and his evil organization to instead doing stuff like beach cleanup, which makes her much less important in the public eye and much less likely to actually get media coverage, which means that Chizuko is not seeing Berry Blossom nearly as much as what she's used to, and what she is seeing is nowhere near as interesting. So what initially seems like a great thing to Chizuko actually ends up being something where she realizes that it has bit her on the ass, and she needs to think about whether there's anything she can do about it. Because obviously, the good intentions that she had in thinking the way she initially did have led to bad results. And what we actually see in the way that Chizuko and Chroma's eventual villainy and return to force as their evil organization group, I can never remember the name, it actually ties into the idea that sometimes bad intentions can lead to good results, which is a really fun play on the overall concept and idea of something. But I mean, in a way, it's actually true. When things happen that are more frustrating and negative and stressful and that are making you unhappy and stuff, one of the things that it can theoretically do, if you actually take advantage of the negativity and make it work for you, is that it can actually encourage you to step up and to do things that are outside of your comfort zone, which will eventually help you be able to be stronger overall, and which can lead to much more net positive results for you. It's about finding that silver lining, and I'm really glad to see that it was covered here. Lastly, I do want to touch on one more thing that I noticed about Chroma that I absolutely loved, which is that while Chroma is a villain, constantly brags about his villainy, which never really seems to actually get to true villainy, and is generally very funny. One thing I've really noticed about Chroma is that outside of the grandpa, Chroma is probably the nicest person in the show. I mean, he never does anything awful or mean to anybody when they come into the convenience store where he works. He looks after and takes care of Chizuko to the point of telling her, when she openly admits that she really isn't interested in the evil organization itself, but rather that she cares about actually getting Berry Blossom to be a hero again. He even tells her that there's no need for her to actually want to focus on Berry Blossom's capture or death or defeat, but rather that if it's actually just the competitive aspect of being a villain that works for Chizuko, then that is what she should focus on, because in Chroma's opinion, the heart of villainy is actually finding and doing what you want to do, which is actually a really interesting way to look at it, and I thought that was really cool. I also thought the scene where he comes up behind Chizuko even though all the stuff has happened, and at that point the evil organization is no more, it's pouring down rain, Chizuko has just had her realization, and he puts the umbrella over her. I thought that was so sweet. And then when they confront Berry Blossom and they've both been zapped by Berry's lightning ability, It's Chroma who is carrying a absolutely tuckered out Chizuko away from the overall battle, and who is reassuring her and who's saying all these nice things to her as they leave. He's not like Rita Repulsa screaming at one of her henchmen. He's actually really cool, so I actually really love that aspect of the show, because I mean, sure, he'll get kind of frustrated with his little bears and stuff, but I mean, half the time we see him, he's trying to like give them treats to get them to do things, and I just find his character overall super adorable, and I really love watching him. But all of this is to say that episode 4 was absolutely superb and is exactly what this show needed. Hopefully we will see the kitty cat come around and start putting the pieces together on what everybody needs, and I hope that he does eventually fall into the role that I wanted for him. We'll see whether that happens or not, though. I really want him to work to get these two groups to actually compete against each other and to use that as media, like, improvement for Berry Blossom, but we'll see whether that happens or not. But those are just my thoughts on this week's episode. I'd love to know what you guys are thinking, so drop a comment below and let me know, and I'll talk to you in the next video. See you later. Bye!